Here we go again. You know what? Nowadays it's like they're not even hiding the fact that they're anti-consumer, anti-gamer, anti-games. Because in the past, like, yeah, they had and by they I mean, the games journalist media, game award, events, and the companies thereof. They had the monopoly on information, right? The new games coming out, new showcases, and you would see that they would actually interview other gamers. Like, I know when G2 was a thing, yeah, that absolute, or G4, whatever the fuck it was called, I can't even remember the name anymore. And they're talking about Halo 3, and they were just interviewing guys just off the street, and all they would talk about is Halo and nothing else. Like, they weren't talking about, the issues at the time. It was escapism, and they treated it like such. And they respected the guys there. They respected Halo. And these were journalists, they were grown ass adults. But they treated people with respect. Right? It wasn't, oh, they're just disgusting gamers and they spat on them. They're just. And I seen like that I seen it and I was like, wow, that is just so wholesome. Like, this is what we lost because ideological leeches just wanted to enter the space. People who don't care for games, they don't care for the industry, they don't care for gamers, they don't care for the consumers, they don't care for fans, right? People who are effectively walking billboards. They only care for this fringe ideology that seeped its way into these communities and into these circles that don't benefit, one, the people spreading it. They don't benefit the community itself. They don't benefit the industry. In fact, we see this ideology make worse games. They make worse, communities. They make everyone loses at the end because these people, they have daddy issues and they want to impose it on anybody, anyone who they view as susceptible. And they can't do this in real life because people will absolutely tell them what the fuck they think about it with no terms of service. They won't get banned from existence. But no, they go into gaming circles, they go into gaming groups, and I guess they inject other people that think like them, and they legitimately the change the formula, they change the form, and you see this again. Black Myth Wukong forced out a game of the year. Like, oh, when was the last time this has happened? Maybe Hogwarts Legacy, yet another game that people universally agreed was just a good game. If you throw away the politics, if you throw away ulterior things that have nothing to do with the game, it is just a good game. But here we go. I'm gonna probably get fucking mad at this because I'd say Black Myth Wukong is. Would I say it's my game of the year? Yeah, I'd say it's my game of the year. Alright, I'm really thinking about this because all the years sort of blend together. Eldenring came out a couple years ago. Yeah, I'd say Black Myth Wukong is game of the year. But now it's getting forced out. Again, these are probably by corporate interests. These are by people who, again, choose an ideology and they choose to impose it. So let's give this a watch.
Now, ever so often, there's a game that comes out that meets and exceeds the expectations of the players. It blows our minds. It's so good, but for some odd reason, it doesn't meet the same expectations for games media. Our interests aren't aligned. Our perspectives are not necessarily the same, and there's conflict in that. And I think that Black Myth Wukong is one of those games. And don't get me wrong, the game reviewed very well. It got over an 80 on most review sites. But with that said, up until the game's release, and then even after the game's release, it was under a constant barrage of negative criticism that had nothing to do with the game whatsoever, and in that, the game never really got a fair shake, at least not in my eyes. Now, 2020.
Yeah, games media, again, they chose a completely different standard to attack Black Myth Wukong on outside of the actual gameplay and the actual game, and this is why gamers and games media are at complete odd in almost every situation. Okay, the one situation I'd say where the games media and gamers went hand in hand was with like Baldur's Gate 3. But that is it. That is all. That is the maybe there are others in the past. I'm thinking in the past 5 years where ideological moralization injected itself into gaming, which is escapism. I'm really trying to think when the star. I guess they admit that nobody actually cares for them, not by their words, but the fact that they only review popular games and they get only predominantly give sevens.
24 has been an absolutely insane year for games. There are so many great games to play, and if you're one of those people that are out there that are like, gaming is dying, let me be the first to tell you, you need to play more games, or just not the same ones over and over again.
Get a PC.
The list, once I get into some of the Game of the Year contenders, it's going to blow your mind, because I honestly forgot.
Like, no, seriously, why have a console? Like, Microsoft does not care for you. Sony just wants to milk you and read into your party chats. The only company that is doing what the consumer wants is Nintendo, but most of their games hit Steam and get emulated eventually anyway. Like, I'm not saying this to be PC Master Race. I'm saying this as a conscientious consumer purchase. Like, if you get the new PlayStation Pro, you're gonna walk away spending over $1,000 anyway. So you might as well. And you get access to the biggest game library possible.
God, how many games even came out this year? This isn't about the award. It's about the recognition that these studios deserve, the reward they deserve beyond just making money. It's making sure that it's known why these games are great so that other publishers and studios can see, hey, this is what it is. This is how we make a game that the players love. And it's not, again, just not the money. But already I'm starting to see games media want to preemptively push back about Black Myth Wukong being in the Game of the Year category, and we're going to talk about that. Before that, today's sponsor. War Thunder is a massive free-to-play, large-scale multiplayer game where you can fight anyone from around the world using ground vehicles, aircraft, helicopters, and naval vessels from the mid-tank. Unique skins, and 100,000 silver lions. Don't miss out. Thank you, War Thunder, for sponsoring this video. We have had a monstrous year in games, and it's wild to think that it's not even over yet with more releases right around the corner. This is about the time of year that Game of the Year candidates are being discussed and debated, and this year we have a lot of difficult choices to make. Dragon's Dogma 2, Final Fantasy VII Rebirth, Helldivers 2, Paper Mario The Thousand Year Door, Prince of Persia The Lost Crown, Persona 3 Reloaded, Metaphor ReFantazio, and Silent Hill 2 Remake are among the highest scoring games that we've had from reviewers this year.
And personally, I think remakes shouldn't be Game of the Year. And this is just a personal thing. Like, yeah, it's a good game. But, and okay, you can argue that maybe the case of Final Fantasy and Silent Hill, they remade effectively the entire UI, and it's effectively a new game. But they should just make a new game. Like, again, this is a personal standard. It's probably, I'm the only one who thinks this way. Like, a lot of people will probably disagree with me, but I don't think remakes should be in Game of the Year. It's just, it imposes an odd standard that is just anti-consumer. You know, just giving games just a couple new things, demanding full retail price. It's just a standard I don't think is healthy.
That's 8 games when only 6 games can be qualified as candidates. We're not even mentioning the stockpile of games that were scored just under that, with titles like Stellar Blade, Black Myth Wukong, Tekken 8, Like a Dragon Infinite Wealth, Unicorn Overlord, Space Marine 2, and more. 2024 has been packed with games, but only a few titles are deserving of being crowned King of the Year, and for many players, that game is Black Myth Wukong. James Throtton of The Gamer penned an article titled, "If Black Myth Wukong isn't nominated for Game of the Year, fans are going to be insufferable." James writes, Black Myth Wukong is a very good action game, taking the Souls-like formula and stretching it into a...
Insufferable. That just seems like a infantile term. People will be mad. Like, insufferable. What's insufferable? Well, like your 12-year-old cousin wanting to play your Xbox while you're playing it. They'll be insufferable. Like, people will be pissed off. People will be mad. And people, again, they will continuously to diminish their credibility, right? Even further, more than they already have. And nowadays they're not even really trying to hide that fact that they have no credibility, but they still they still act as if they, or the leaders of the information, as if they are the moral hegemony, but no one cares for games journalists. No one cares for games media. Few people care for the game awards after the whole thing with, what the fuck is that name of that game? I do this thing where I completely lose the name of games. It was, oh, whatever. There's been a time, again, people just completely lost faith in games media and games journalism. And no, they're not trying to hide it. I know that they're not trying. They know that I know that they're not trying to hide it. The Last of Us 2. Okay, I thought about it. After The Last of Us 2 effectively sweeped, people knew, okay. And I'm not even saying The Last of Us 2 was a bad game. I'm just saying most of the publicity wasn't good publicity. But because there were publicity, they're like, oh, hey, it got the most clicks. Therefore, it should be on top. But that's not what people were talking about.
A boss rush format. Its popularity even surpasses that of its inspirations, garnering millions of players in mere days. It's a genuine contender for the Game Awards, but with how stacked 2024 is shaping up to be, competition is fierce. Polygon recently updated its Game of the Year frontrunner list, while the Golden Joystick Awards announced its 6 nominees for this year's PC and console Game of the Year categories. Black Myth Wukong is nowhere to be seen outside of smaller categories, and so TikTok right now is a deluge of angry gamers declaring that games media is corrupt and that it's all a part of some wider conspiracy. The game was not rigged.
Again, conspiracy is just not required. Like, there is a push to only shove into place Western games and shove out games that people actually legitimately like, regardless of it's Western or Eastern. Like, again, I hate conspiracy because it requires conspiring. Like, this isn't, they're not conspiring. They're actively doing this. They are showing this. They know that they're doing this. We know that they know that they're doing this. They know that we know that they know that they're doing this. And they're still doing it. And angry gamers. It's like, why are they insulting angry gamers? No, these are angry consumers. These are people who play the fucking game.
From the start, it's just been a very, very competitive...
And maybe this article is trying to give it a fair shake, but, I mean, quotations, my guy.
...year. This week alone, we've had Silent Hill 2 Remake...
I don't know the dude fighting this thing. To be fair, this is an annoying fucking boss, but my dude be whiffing all his heavies. I'm sorry, I should shut the fuck up.
For ReFantasio and Dragon Ball Sparking Zero, 3 critically acclaimed hits that are all vying for the spotlight with equal fervor. Earlier this year, we saw the launch of Astrobot, Final Fantasy VII Rebirth, Like a Dragon Infinite Wealth, Tekken 8, Helldivers 2, and Dragon's Dogma. That's not to mention the stellar year it's been for indies. Black Myth Wukong, while good, we scored it 4 stars, just doesn't measure up to the greats. Hell, it's not even the best Souls-like this year, as that award goes to Elden Ring Shadow of the Erdtree. For those that have used Wukong as fuel in a culture war since before it was even released, its absence on these lists is an attack. It's a ploy by games media for reasons, even though it has an open critic aggregate of 82. There's one big argument cropping up across Reddit and slowly replacing all the goth girls on my For You page as to why it deserves to be nominated.
To be fair, that pissed me off too. But yeah, I mean, okay, maybe it's not the greatest, but it's breaking records. Like, Black Myth Wukong is breaking records. Even records that, say, Elden Ring beforehand held. Like, it is surpassing even that. So, yeah, I think it deserves a spot. Yeah, I think it deserves a spot, regardless. Or at least to be mentioned, right?
It sold well. James, I will speak for those that you are arguing against. Black Myth Wukong doesn't deserve to be nominated because of its sales. It deserves to be nominated because it is the first ever release from a studio, an inexperienced studio, that made a stunningly gorgeous game with great combat, a compelling story, beautiful music, incredibly detailed and culturally accurate environments, some of the most unique boss encounters I've seen in a game like this, and themes that we don't often see in games. It was original, fresh, and most importantly, fun. And while many of the games that were mentioned in this article are incredible games, they are just copies of previous titles or even remakes.
Yeah, that and the sales. I mean, it is all of these. It's the sales, it's the game, it's the fact that, and again, if you understand that, if you want to make a game about Chinese mythology, there are so many restrictions placed upon you to get it done. Otherwise, you cannot sell the game. Like, imagine this game just was not sold because there's a second of disrespect to Chinese lore and the lore of the Journey to the West. And they're like, no, you cannot release this, right? To my knowledge, I guess in America, there's a completely different set of standards, but they are not as constricting as they are in China. And because of all this, because it's breaking records, because of everything you've just said, and the fact that it is widely received, it has, I wouldn't say the mechanics are new, but I'd say it brought back, the older hack and slash combo based games. Like the older like 99 Nights 1 was one of my favorite games. One of it's combo based, but even like Dynasty Warriors before it got all flashy and it's just remade the same game over and over. Like, it brought all this stuff back and it proved that, smaller, contained, original titles is what the consumer wants. And it proves that by the sales. Like, this game is clearly what people want, but it's not what we're getting from Western media.
Industry should be celebrating and rewarding studios that work this hard, take a risk, and deliver something altogether new. And we're not even mentioning how the game sold at a fair price. I am so exhausted by this. Do you want to know why players think there's some grand conspiracy? Do you want to know why they think there's some media bias? Well, you're not doing yourself any service when you try to minimize the game at every given turn. You called it a Souls-like. It's not even a Souls-like. I actually did the same thing in a video too, so I'm actually not going to take points away from you for that. But I don't understand where this idea that this game somehow became something that the culture war LARPers had latched onto even before its release, because to my recollection, the only thing that I can remember is games media were the ones that were pushing these allegations from IGN against game science through different articles. And then also at the exact same time, there were a ton of people pining over tweets that were completely mistranslated.
Yeah, that, and again, if you have 7 games media outlets after 30 minutes within each other coming out with the exact same article about the exact same thing, it's like, clearly there's a unilateral bias and a unilateral standard that they're trying to impose over the gamer, the consumer, and this is again, it goes against the game. It has absolutely nothing to do with the game. That's the thing people see, and it's like, what the fuck is this? Like, all the criticism has absolutely nothing to do with gameplay, mechanics. Has nothing to do with, if there are bugs, the story, the artistic value, the original story of the game, the sales. Like, all these things operate and exist outside of the product, but they still think it influences the product. And it's like, well, clearly it doesn't, but they're going to act like it does regardless.
If anything, it was games media that was dragging this game into the culture war, not the other way around. It's just not true. The entire time before this game's release, and this is the reason why I say the game didn't get a fair shake, is that every single time this game was brought up, it was always with a qualifier. Black Myth Wukong is a fantastic action game, but there was this report from IGN that was also based on some mistranslations, but we don't really care about that much. But anyway, they said some...
Yeah, and the thing is, these 7 games media outlets reference themselves, right? So they act like, oh no, this is completely fair, completely unbiased journalism. Only we're going to reference yet another journalistic outlet, which reference a completely different journalistic outlet, with also reference a completely different journalistic outlet that all say the same fucking thing. It's like, again, is it conspiracy if they know they're doing it and they know that you know that they're doing it? And they do it anyway. Is that really a conspiracy if it's out in the open? I don't think it is. I think this is something that's absolutely happening.
Things, or they do some things we don't necessarily agree with. Black Myth Wukong, we're giving an 8 out of 10, but just to let you know, we saw some tweets that were also mistranslated, and we didn't really like exactly what they said or the things that this company stands for. It was always like that. The game never got a fair chance, at least in the media light. And that's not the same for every other game that was out there. All the rest of the games never had any of this kind of stuff. And the worst part is again, all of these things were alleged, never even proven, yet they were touted as fact. They were included in game reviews, game review videos, and reviews. You don't think that's too far? What do you think is the purpose of that when you put that stuff into an article other than to minimize the game and hopefully steer players away from buying it?
Yeah, and if I'm not mistaken, Black Myth Wukong was the only situation. Well, there are others, but it's the only situation where, in like the review, well, granted, in some reviews like IGN, they did not bring up the outside of game, but in like other people's reviews, like alt media that clearly had a bias on YouTube, they included these things. And the written articles, they've included things completely outside of the game. Like, even if they were a bunch of edgy boys on Reddit and on Twitter, I don't care. Like, it's a good game. I really just don't fucking care.
That's the point. You want to understand and know why players think there's some grand conspiracy? Well, it's not hard for them to jump to that conclusion when it's staring them 2 inches from their face. On the topic of the game's sales, the writer continues with, it's hardly a compelling defense, but sales figures have long been used as evidence that supposedly anti-woke games like Wukong are what your everyday gamer really wants. In reality, it was a supposedly anti-woke games like Wukong are what your everyday gamer really wants. In reality, it was a success because the game was marketed to the enormous untapped Chinese demographic. It was...
Yeah, okay. So, I mean, so what? Like, again, it's just such an odd argument. It's like, okay, so what is the conversion rate between the Chinese buyer and the American buyer of this game? Like, well, what are you trying to argue here? And I mean, and mobile games do the same thing, right? You know, whenever Diablo 3 came out, they wanted to target the Chinese buyer. You know, when the what three of the poo poo doo doo Warhammer 40K card games came out, they did the same fucking thing. Like, what is your argument?
Was only made worse when streamers were supposedly sent guidelines asking them not to mention feminist propaganda or politics. Black Myth Wukong became the poster child for the most toxic, vocal gamers on the internet, and everything since its launch has only worked to further that image.
Yeah, they're like, just talk about the game. Like, shut the fuck up about politics. Shut the fuck up about, the political things happening in China. Talk about the fucking game. And again, they're not dumb. Like, they know the things that are happening in America, which is probably why they chose to have those standards for reviewers. And it makes fucking sense.
Wukong was a monumental hit. There's no denying that. Within days, it skyrocketed to the 7th most played game on Steam of all time, the peak concurrent player count of 2.4 million players, but numbers aren't everything. Banana, the viral clicker game that generates Steam Marketplace items, has a higher 24-hour peak than Black Myth Wukong right now by over 100,000 players. Avengers: Infinity War and Spider-Man: No Way Home are among the highest grossing films of all time, but they didn't walk away with the pinnacle Oscar for good reason.
Okay, because one is, I think this is a mobile game. Well, I think it can also be played on it. But it's effectively a mobile game that can be played on a computer. And this is, like, why are we comparing a movie and a clicker mobile game with a, like, why can't Black Myth Wukong just stay, like, be reviewed on its own merit? Why do you have to bring in, like, you are, well, I don't think you're reviewing the game, but in a review, like, this doesn't fucking matter, and this doesn't fucking matter.
Sales do not equal quality, but Black Myth Wukong has been weaponized in a culture war ever since it was announced, and it doing well has only been used as ammunition to argue that games media is out of touch with gamers. Not being nominated for any Game of the Year awards, it's October, it's likely going to be in the mix for a lot of sites, and still could be up for many categories at the Game Awards, is just more fuel to prove that point. It hasn't upset fans because they think it's a good game deserving to be among the best. It has upset fans because they see its absence as an attack in their one-sided feud.
But why do they see that? Isn't it because this is the reason for this? Again, you're trying to make this argument as if one does not predicate the other, but it obviously people who played the game and like the game are going to say, yeah, it should be up there. And okay, maybe there will be some people who have never played the game but agree it should still be up there. And maybe based off, what they've seen, the gameplay, and what other people like. Some people just follow the bandwagon, but it should still be mentioned, and it should be in the Game of the Year attender based off the numbers, based off, even the reviews. Like, I mean, IGN reviews are kind of garbage in regard, like, whatever. But they still said it was a good game. And they were obviously reviewing a completely different version of the game. But, yeah, if the consumer wants the game to be Game of the Year, it should be Game of the Year. Like, at the end of the day, we're trying to, armchair, not the armchair skeptic this, but if the consumer wants it, it should be there. And it shouldn't just not be there because the consumer wants it. It's like, yes, it should be a nominator or contender for Game of the Year.
As we edge nearer the big celebratory end of the year closer that is the Game Awards, we are going to see this outrage spiral. If Black Myth Wukong doesn't get a nomination for the main award, it has a few competitors to shut out in Best Action, its fans will see that as a personal slight. We're witnessing it already, and I've seen my colleagues get attacked over the past year just for covering the game. If fans are this riled up by an award ceremony many self-proclaim they've never heard of, or a list of frontrunners that means very little, then I can't see being snubbed from the Game Awards going down well. Man, the lack of self-awareness when saying that the sales of the game were used as ammunition in a culture war, while you yourself are focusing purely on the sales of the game to minimize the entire discussion around the game. That's interesting.
Yeah, and that's also hypocritical. Like, again, you're insulting the intelligence. It's like, oh, well, sales shouldn't matter, but oh, we're going to use sales. Like, oh, this game has more concurrent players. Oh, and this movie, which is completely different from the game, you raked in a lot of money. It's like, again, it's not hard if the consumer wants it, just put it in. And I really don't care the reason.
It's convenient to go after the outrage of those who can't voice their.
And I mean, I'm not saying because it should be nominated Game of the Year. I'm saying it should be at least in the running of Game of the Year. If it's in the running, I don't care. But again, if a remake becomes Game of the Year, I'm gonna probably be mad, or a remaster, or a whatever. That's what's going to piss me off.
Concerns properly, because the writer is absolutely right. Sales does not mean a game should be Game of the Year. If sales were the leading factor, then Baldur's Gate 3 should have lost to Hogwarts Legacy, or Call of Duty should have won for 5 years straight, since it was the best-selling game since 2017.
But to be fair, Hogwarts Legacy was also snubbed from the Game Awards for, again, ideological reasons. Well, I don't even think they were on the running for ideological reasons outside of the game. And I mean, Call of Duty, if you have the 8th Call of Duty game, after a while, it should be like, no, you shouldn't be Game of the Year. If you reuse assets, you shouldn't be a nominee for Game of the Year. Like, again, the Game of the Year should be different, innovative, new ideas, not remasters, prequels. Okay, maybe prequels and sequels, but by very strict criteria. Like, the Game of the Awards should be new. And after a while, I think, if there are indie games that are good, it should also fit the category. It shouldn't just be popular games, in my opinion. Well, popular mainstream games. Like, there should be some, shuffling out, or how maybe like an indie game of the year award or something. But again, there's so many things wrong. And again, the reason why people watch this is for the information. And I understand my standards are probably idiotic, but the way the Game of the Year awards are now, okay, sometimes they align, sometimes they don't, and I think it's just all based on clout and on searches outside of, the actual controversies.
A slew of other factors here that should be discussed, but the writer and other media pundits aren't taking the time to discuss that. They're just hand-waving the angry gamers and throwing it out into the bin with the rest of the culture war commentary. Now, my question is, why is it that on the topic of game sales, the Chinese player base is used to minimize the overall impact of the game's sales, success, and popularity? Again, to quote the writer, the game was a monumental hit. There's no denying that. Only to follow it up with, but it succeeded because there was an untapped Chinese market of players. Like, those players don't even count? Why aren't we having a discussion on why, censorship aside, Western games haven't been able to penetrate that market as effectively as Black Myth Wukong?
Why the games from Westerns haven't really been able to penetrate, any other country. Like, it's bad enough Western games are terrible in the West, but it's even worse that, well, okay, I guess in the case of the PlayStation PSN bullshit, if you don't have a PlayStation Network in your country, you're kind of boned, which is why that's such a bad fucking idea. I mean, and this is Sony claims to be inclusive, but excludes the majority of countries on the planet for the sake of moderation and banning people and selling their data of the small fringe Western countries that could actually have a PSN network account. But that's a whole nother discussion. It's like, Western media used to be, or in as a whole, used to be sought after. Like, there are whole like games and the whole like Twin Peaks was huge in Japan. And Twin Peaks, like, so many games were based off, like, any rural style horror genre, like game or TV show or movie, can drag its inspirations from Twin Peaks, such as Silent Hill or Resident Evil or Uzumaki, right? Or and even things like what was it, Legacy of the Druids, and like, and there are whole like communities that were sprung up around specifically pirating Western movies, Western shows, Western games, Western entertainment as a whole, predominantly in Europe and like Russia. It's like Western media used to be a phenomenon, but it's like they're doing everything in their power not to be that. Like, every decision they make is to not spread American culture. It's in fact to constrain it, and in some cases to make it worse in comparison to other media. And people defend this, right? People defend just the deterioration of Western media. Okay, because I guess they're doing it for ideological reasons, and you're forced to defend it. Like, that's just something that I don't understand, or I kind of understand, but it's not. If the consumer loses, then it's bad. Like, you can have all the justification in the world. If the consumer loses at the end of the day, then it's a bad thing.
Especially when there are that many players that could make that much of an impact on a game's sales. Black Myth Wukong is just as deserving as any other title that could go up there for Game of the Year. That's not saying that those games aren't worthy either. They are. But the thing is that it just feels like the coverage around this game, the discussions around this game, have just felt off. Purposefully dishonest in a lot of ways. Black Myth Wukong was incredibly popular. It was incredibly popular with the Chinese because it was the first game that really represented their culture and history in a way that could bridge the gap between nations. Players around the world loved it. They connected with it. And because of that, it brought down cultural boundaries. We don't see that very often. It should.
Yeah, it was inclusive. Like Dragon Ball Z, right, with anime, was a cultural phenomenon in Latin America, right? It's like, for some reason, these are things that no one thinks about because I guess it doesn't affect people, so they don't care. But I think this is something that is important. Like, gaming and media is one of the best ways to spread culture. But what we're seeing is the Western games, Western movies, Western TV shows are just doing the complete. Again, they're trying to represent a small fringe minority, ideological minority of people, right? With, the standards, with the artistic design choices, with the messaging. Like, they're trying to represent just a small fringe demographic of not even all of Americans, but of just a small demographic of Americans that just does not resonate with the rest of the world.
Be something that everybody should be cheering for and happy for. That is the power of this hobby. That is what it can accomplish at times, but we're losing sight of that. I think this all loops back to the fact that game science did not bend the knee in fealty to games media when they started hurling accusations at them, baseless accusations at them, and demanded an answer. They said no comment. That has nothing to do with the game or anything else right now, and they didn't feel that it was in good faith, and they just ignored it entirely. And I think that games media as a whole took offense to that. They didn't like that too much. They don't like it.
Yeah, they're becoming a racketeering business. They're like, oh, it would be a shame if you got sexism allegations, to be ashamed if you got racism allocations. And they're like, brother, shut the fuck up and just talk about the game or get the fuck out my face. It's like any normal person on the street would act that exact same way. Like, what the fuck are you talking about? Get out my face, bitch. You dumb bitch. But no, apparently with games media, yeah, they demand it, and they will do everything in their power to get you to bend the knee. And okay, I'm not doubting that that's probably why it sold. Like at the time, people were just sick and tired of the fucking culture, and they made purchases just all out based out of spite, just to spite that type of culture, which is why you don't drag people to this. Like you don't put people in these situations, but they actively did. And because of that, well, and I allude to this in almost every video, that's why we have the presidential elect that we have now. Is because even amongst a group of people that they claim to represent is just sick and fucking tired of things like identity politics, things like, Western media going to shit, purposefully going to shit, and spiting the consumer at the same time. People are sick and tired of it, and they will vote for the exact opposite.
When their power and position is questioned, when their authority, or what little they have left of it, is questioned. This should be a game that we should be celebrating because of the fact that it broke down cultural boundaries. Beyond that, it was a game that was absolutely gorgeous. It was coming from a studio that this is the first game that they were releasing. It came out relatively polished, fresh-feeling combat, boss encounters that we've never even seen before, with attack stylings we haven't seen, environments we've never been in, atmosphere that was absolutely fantastic. They went out and they scanned real-life statues and architecture to try to make sure that the game had the most authentic rendition possible, and they delivered on it. The game was absolutely incredible. The stop motion animations, the anime cutscenes, and a bunch of different style of art. It was great. It was such a good game. But all of that isn't being discussed. Instead,
yeah, and again, even mechanically, right? And this is why I don't think difficulty settings are required. Like skilled players and good players, and hell, even casual players will play specifically in a way to accommodate their skill set. And you've seen this in Elden Ring, right? It's like people will play specific builds in specific ways to accommodate, rather they're not entirely skilled at the game, or if they are, they will effectively make the game harder for themselves. And Black Myth Wukong did the same thing, right? And I'm playing a game called Forever Winter, amazing game, but I get absolutely blasted if I play alone. This is a game meant to be played with people, but it's the same idea. Like how do I explain this? People will cater their experience to the game, and if they want to play a harder game, they will make decisions. They'll put on, say, in Black Myth Wukong case, they'll put specific armor, put specific weapons, specific spells in place to make the game more challenging for themselves, but and more rewarding. Like I think there's a specific armor set in Black Myth Wukong where you take more damage, but you do more damage. And that adds to a completely different playstyle. And that's just the armor. We're not even taking consideration of the 4 different types of spells, the type of staff you use, or spear. We're not even taking that and or how you built the character, you can respect like for free effectively. But yeah, people will cater if people want a difficult game, they will cater the game to be difficult to accommodate themselves, and they don't need like an arbitrary setting to do that for them. Games have evolved so much that this isn't a requirement. Not that it should not exist. Like game difficulty settings should obviously exist, but games have evolved in a way that if you can implement difficulty in the tools you use outside of the setting, it's you should do that.
Instead, it's all locked behind social politics. Black Myth Wukong was nothing short of a revelation for me. The game was a breath of fresh air in a world that is drowning in microtransactions and endless live service models. Much like Baldur's Gate 3 and Elden Ring, it was just a straightforward video game that focused on delivering a great experience without the baggage of modern gaming trends. Selling it at a fair price really made it shine as a prime example of what players have been craving, a complete, immersive experience that doesn't feel like it's constantly trying to upsell you. Like I said before, honestly, it's just a damn good video game. I'm not a professional reviewer, but playing Black Myth Wukong was an awe-inspiring journey for me that I can't stop thinking about. From the moment that I started, I was blown away by its visuals, its gameplay, its music. Every single boss fight felt exhilarating, and I found myself savoring every single moment rather than trying to just rush and finish the game. It's a game.
Yeah, and I mean, it throws a lot of bosses at you, and I wouldn't say they're difficult. Okay, I can probably recall like 3 bosses, 4 that were legitimately difficult, but that's because they had mechanics around them that, you know, if you had specific items with you, you could, you know, work around them, but if you didn't, you're having a hard time. And those items were based off, okay, if you did the quest to get the item, but even if you do, you could choose not to use the item. But it's also based upon your build. Like, I have one build in Black Myth Wukong, which in Yu-Gi-Oh! There's this deck called Super Heavy Samurais that can attack while in defense position using their defense and damage calculation. I effectively had an armor and a weapon that did the same thing, only you lost your perfect dodge. And so you had the armor, you boofed the fuck out of your defense with your mystic summons, with, you know, your brews that you use, with whatever potions you use. And you had this staff that effectively added your defense as attack. And I'm effectively beating the fuck out of them with my defense. It is a cool fucking build that I have. Oh yeah, in Yu-Gi-Oh! There's this old card called the Super Defense Shogun. It can also attack while in defense, but it uses its attack and damage calculation instead of its defense. That was an old card and one of my favorite. But yeah, and again, this again always just adds to the experience, because the more I played the game, the more I figured out, oh hey, there's so much more I did not do or forgot to do. And I played the game over. I probably beat it like 4 times. And it does get harder each time you beat it. And that just adds to the game.
That didn't just entertain, it resonated on a deeper level, reminding me why I fell in love with video games in the first place. Now, with that said, the other games that are out there are genuine contenders. I don't want this video to come off like Black Myth Wukong should be the only game of the year and no other game deserves it. Final Fantasy VII Rebirth was absolutely phenomenal. While I know that there's some people out there that think the game doesn't deserve a spot because it's a remake, it's not. It's a full-on reimagining. The combat, the storytelling, how events play out, the music, the atmosphere, all of it makes for a game that's deserving of the crown. Helldivers 2, despite its controversies, was for all intents and purposes the game to beat this year. It sold tens of millions of copies. It felt like a trip back to the old days of Halo 2 and Halo 3 post-launch, where friends are asking when you're going to get on, you're staying up way too late playing the game, and all you could do was think about what was going to happen in the game next. I just recently started playing Metaphor ReFantazio, and I'll be honest with you guys, it's likely this year's game of the year. It makes huge improvements in turn-based games. It has music that has no right being as good as it is. The set pieces and art direction go from breathtaking to nightmare-inducing, and it has character writing and stories that show quality, care, and the authenticity that players have been complaining for years that game studios can't touch without ham-fisting those themes in. It is the perfect example of how to do topics like diversity and inclusivity the right way. I just want to emphasize that this isn't about one game deserving a title over another. Every title mentioned has its own merits and fan bases, and they're all worthy of recognition in their own right. Black Myth Wukong, however, stands out for its originality and its cultural significance, but also for how this game has been mishandled by the media. It's a testament to how hard game science worked on their game and the fresh perspective that they bring. After all, that's what games should be about, creating experiences that are resonating and bringing us together, not just the ones that fit into a narrow definition of success that is made up by a handful of writers. You know, I'm starting to realize that access journalism doesn't work in both ways. You know, because they want to make sure that they're trying to stay in line, that they're doing their best to be able to hold on to their contacts, their insider information, get their keys and their codes, and make sure that they can hold on to their jobs and their relevance.
Yeah, and that's bad. Like, if anything you do is not in the strict benefit of the consumer, then that's bad. And access journalism as a whole, in my opinion, is just it's an insult to the consumer. It insults gaming as a whole, and it insults even the company itself, because they admit that no, we don't really have, you know, the integrity to give things their fair shake, because we need all the benefits we get. Like that's just, I think that's just a bad thing, and it's going to continue to exist, but I'm going to continue to shit on access media. It is not in the interest of gamers or the industry. They are leeches. Like, okay, maybe information is important, right? But we live in, like, they don't no longer have, like, the forefront or, like, of information. Like, anyone can just look up a game, and anybody has a fucking iPhone now. Like, when game journalism was a thing, okay, like, most of your game information came from, like, the magazines or, like, the demos, and because it was, like, discs and physical, like, sales of the disc, it really just came down to if you could buy the game and play it and see if you like it. Nowadays, they just don't have that chokehold on information anymore. More people, the only thing people care about games journalist media is shitting on games journalist media and shitting on bad Western products. Like, that's the only reason why anyone cares.
But on the other end, when it comes to some of these smaller studios and publishers, they desperately need the help of games media to be able to be noticed, to get in the front of the eyes of players in the first place. Get their trailers out there, get articles written and things like that, get them in the algorithms and whatnot. And I think that some of these journalists that are out there view that as an opportunity for them to throw their weight around. That's where they get to be the bully this time. They get to push everybody else around and tell them the way that it's going to be. And I think that Black Myth Wukong stood in opposition to that, and they didn't like it too much. And it might not be all of them. I'm not going to say it's every single one of them. There's some damn good journalists that are still out there. I know you guys are probably shaking your heads. No, there's no way. Believe me, they exist. I have a few of them that are out there that are some of my favorites. But with that said, I think that's the case here for Black Myth Wukong. You know, it's not about sales and it's not about scores. It's about fairness and image. And I just do not think, under any circumstances, that Black Myth Wukong was painted in the same colors as some of the other games that we've seen this year. Even games that had controversy. Pal World, I mean, that game got absolutely shredded by games media. They hated that game even though the players liked it. But even still then, I don't feel like the game got dogged on this hard. Going back, Helldivers 2, they went through their entire controversy. Games media didn't even want to touch it. They didn't even want to talk about it. They just brought it up slightly and then walked away from it. Just let the gamers be mad. And I think the reason why is because they just didn't see it from our perspective. They didn't care to see it from our perspective, which then rings me.
Yeah, and see, that's the issue, right? It's like you can point out, and it's in the double digits of all the situations that games journalists and games media was in just stark contrast to the consumer, to gamers. And you can also point in the double digits all the things that were like the gamers did care about and wanted to talk about in media that game journalists did not. And the more times this happened, you effectively just fragment whatever little credibility you have, right? And what little, and you fragment it even more for each single goddamn time they do these things. And nowadays, it's to the point where people just shit on games media. Like, and obviously no one likes harassment, but again, if you put yourself as the morality police, as the moral monolith, people are going to turn that against you the minute you show that you're not actually journalistic, like there is no journalistic integrity. And it's also the fucking internet. You're going to have crazy fucking psychos out there that do bad things. Like, this is to be expected. Like, I mean, people knew this in like 2005 that these people existed, right? And they exist now. It's just now it's used as a shield. Like, oh, I'm getting harassment. Therefore, if you have any level of criticism, we'll count that as harassment. And like people see the tactics and like, brother, shut the fuck up.
Me around to this idea that when it comes to a game like Black Myth Wukong, or maybe even like Space Marine 2, probably less so on that one, I think that there are some writers, some journalists that are out there that see that these games are being used in a culture war, that they are diametrically opposed to whatever the side of that culture war is, and they do not want to give them a win under any circumstances. And that does affect their review at the end of the day. They don't want to hand that over to them. They know that they're going to use it as ammunition against them, and they're never going to hear the end of it. And as a result, well, points get docked, the image of the game gets smeared, and this is the result that you get. I don't know if that's going to be the end result of all of this, but it looks like it is. One thing the reviewer, the writer, did get right, there's a lot of games to be vying for a spot as Game of the Year this year. A lot of games deserve it. We've had some awesome games release, and there's still more that are right around the corner. Stalker 2 is, I think, next month. We just had Call of Duty. Black Ops 6 just came out recently. That game got reviewed really well. It did really well. The players seem to really like it, which is crazy for a Call of Duty game, but, I mean, stranger things have happened. So, who knows? Maybe there's something else that's sleeping in the wings that we don't know that's going to come out and get a bunch of 10s and 9s.
I like 1,007.
Anyway, thank you guys for watching. I hope you guys enjoyed the video. Make sure to share the video with your friends. Make sure to like the video if you enjoyed it. Comment down below what game you think is going to be Game of the Year, or what game you want to be Game of the Year. And yeah, outside of that, my friends, stay cool, stay righteous, stay safe. Make sure to catch me in the next video. Catch me live on Twitch, and I'll check you guys next time.
Yeah, I do believe there is a level of vitriol. And again, the fact that games are part of the culture war, like, gamers didn't want this. Gamers didn't care. Gamers just wanted good games. But we see that bad games are being promoted, and good games like Black Myth Wukong are being shat on. And games are just not being, given their fair shake. And people see this, and they are mad. It won the most important award, making tons of money and keeping the lights on at a game science, which allows them to make more games. I wouldn't say that's the most important reward, but yeah, making money I mean, lots of bad games make money, right? Like this game right here made a lot of government subsidies, got a lot of government grants, got a lot of tax write-offs, and Concord did cost like 40 million, and I do believe they made a lot of money, but it's not for the reasons that gamers care about. Starblade, Black Myth, and Space Marines are on the media blacklist. I believe that. Bro, Dragon Age Fail Guarding and Game of the Year are even in the same sentence. I've lost all hope. Yeah, there's no reason why this game should even be a contender. Like, if this game's even a contender of Game of the Year, I'm gonna be so fucking pissed. Funny, Black Myth Wukong gets criticism for something that doesn't have to do with the game. Dragon Age the Veilguard gets praised for something that doesn't have it to do with the game. Yes. Because the things that have absolutely nothing to do with Dragon Age were put in to Dragon Age. Like, people see these standards being molded and skewed just to fit the idea. Some tells me that Dragon Age Veilguard is going to get tons of nominations, and we all know why. I don't know, like, and I got information that even on the Reddit, there's like a civil war between the ideological individuals that don't actually play games, but see themes and defend the themes. And then the game wars needs to be dismantled. Stop paying attention to God. Okay, there's too many acronyms here and it's making my head hurt. Yeet. The reason why Black Myth Wukong was not nominated is because it's been a really competitive year for games. The gaslighting is getting so out of hand. Again, if the people want it to be nominated, make it put it like not even make it game of the year, but if people want it nominated to be in the running, put it the fuck in. It isn't the Game Awards if the game journals are the only ones deciding to vote at this point. It's the Game Journalists Award. Bring power back to the players. Yeah, I agree with this. I don't know how. Again, it's journos and gaming corporate interests just sucking each other off. One of the most important things too is that Wukong actually worked on release. There was a few issues for sure, but compared to most half-baked games that won't let you get past the menu screen at launch, it's night and day. Yeah, I agree. Wukong didn't buy into the consultancy protection racket, so Access Media was sent to break their knees. Yes, and this is what people see, right? And this isn't a conspiracy. We know this is happening. We know this is what they want to impose, and they can't even hide it anymore. So, yeah. But anyway, that's all I gotta say about this. It should be in the running at least. But that's all I gotta say about this. See ya.